I want people to understand this ordeal. It's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal. Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
Rebecca, remember when I had that wedding invitation and the newspaper clipping and the shredded document and the napkin with a message on the back on the kitchen table?
Yes.
I wasn't planning a crime. I was trying to solve one.
Oh, it makes sense.
Dispatch by Breakout Games delivers all those things and more straight to your home, told through clues dispatched to you in the mail. The story draws you in to solve a crime over several months of interactive investigation. Satisfy your curious mind with 50% off your first delivery. Go to breakoutdispatch.com/writers and use the code WRITERS to subscribe today.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the podcast about other podcasts and also about true crime, pop culture, journalism. And this week, we'll tear the lid off of Gimlet's new podcast, The Habitat. What happens when would-be astronauts stop being polite and start getting real? And we'll give our snap judgment on the beginning of Westworld Season 2, plus some very important breaking true crime updates. Joining me to dive into all that and a whole lot more is my true crime co-author, real-life husband, and sexy robot cowboy, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Howdy, ma'am.
We should make it clear that you wrote that intro for yourself.
No, that isn't what I wrote. That's what I wrote. I wrote sex robot cowboy.
Oh.
Not sexy robot.
Okay. Also with us is the acclaimed novelist behind the City Trilogy and book club commissar, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
And finally, playing understudy for our own Lara Bricker this week is the host of True Crime Obsessed and the Broadway Backstory podcasts, a man who would never confuse Alan Cumming with Pee Wee Herman, Patrick Hines. Hello, Patrick.
You guys, I don't even know. I can't even talk. I've been trying to find a cat of the week all day.
We don't have one.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure.
We're not doing that segment this week. We're not doing
I was like, I have to go to a general store or some sort of cornfield maze or like get a pumpkin of some kind. Like, I just have to do something quaint, get some like pumpkin spice scented something and just sit down.
Oh my God.
Because there's so much Lara Bricker. You need to bake something. That's what you need to do.
Oh God. I just love that woman.
Moose chili.
You need to dump your husband Steve for a fireman.
Fireman Ken. Woohoo. It's that hot in here.
All right. First thing we need to take care of tonight. Kevin, can you please read this for me?
Hate mail.
That's right. We received a lot of hate mail after last week's episode. And
is it hate mail or just for corrections?
I like to call corrections
mail.
Hate mail. Can we just lump
Sure.
it in?
All right,
It's a neater
I
title.
won't stand for this. This is the best podcast on the internet. I'm not having it.
I just want to say I'm not going to read any of the hate mails. I'm just going to respond to them real quick. It rains a lot in Norway. Okay, I know that now. We have no idea. We have no idea how to pronounce Nicola, the name. No, it is not a common name in the United States. And yes, fine listeners of Crime Writers On, I do in fact know that Ireland is not part of the UK and that Scotland is. And I do know that England is actually a country. I also know that Alan Cumming is Scottish and that British is not an acceptable blanket term for people from the UK or Great Britain or the British Isles for that matter. I'm sorry about all of that.
What about limey? Can you call them all limeys?
I'm sorry about all of that. We record this live to tape, and when we're tired and drinking wine, sometimes we say things that aren't 100% accurate, and that's the way all that went down.
Yeah.
I will say I composed and then deleted like 4 tweets about Pee Wee Herman and Alan Cumming last week. I was like, I can't come for Bricker. She's the only one I haven't gotten into a Broadway show yet.
Yeah.
We got to just wait till we make that happen.
Yeah, and Bricker, and she will be the first one to admit, she is not like the most And she always says this. She's always like, I'm just like a dummy from Vermont. It's like her always like her excuse for not knowing things. But she definitely doesn't have like the, her world of pop culture is relatively siloed. It's all British mysteries.
Mm-hmm. So she should know where the Shetland
baking
Islands are.
shows.
Right, yep. Yeah.
And I think that's where it ends. I'm not 100, but
Was it the Wild Men of Alaska or whatever?
Oh yes, Wild Men of
Bushmen? What was
Alaska,
it?
Bushmen
Bush
of Alaska.
people.
Bush people.
Whatever.
If we were to lock Steve Tipton, my husband, and Laura Bricker in a room together, we'd probably never see either of them ever again. British like mysteries and baking shows. Are you kidding me? Steve and Laura are like soulmates.
Yes, and there's all the whole thing too, where she likes to read books about detectives with cats solving cat mysteries. Remember that one? When we had our first book club podcast and we were doing the vote for the book, I remember Toby was like, I am not fucking talking about a book where a cat solves a crime. So
now he's the commissar. He can pick whatever he wants.
Exactly. So before
right.
we get to our deep content this week, there's one other thing I want to do. And Toby, I want to do it for you. Are you ready?
Nice. Yes.
All right, Kevin, can you please read this for me?
Toby's boycotted podcast update.
So, Toby, last week you and all of us talked about the new podcast, Death in Ice Valley. And your take on it was that it was, I believe you said 7 minutes of content stretched into a full half-hour episode.
Of cut rate Enya music.
With cut rate Enya backdrop. And then you made it maybe tongue-in-cheek proposal that we could just recap for you the quick amount of content in future episodes of Death in Ice Valley over a soundtrack of cut rate Enya. I may have said that. Guess what, Toby Ball?
It's about to happen.
Here
isn't
it is. This week on Death in Ice Valley, episode 2, A Case of Clues. All right, it starts with that singing that Toby loves and there's a lot of rain. Then the podcasters have decided on 1970 as being the year the body Eastall woman was found, not 1971 as described in the previous episode. Also, the two hosts pronounce Eastall differently from each other, so I feel a little bit better about that. Then there's more rain. Then we hear from a crime novelist for his take on the story. He tells us that in the U.S., no one is 100% sure who killed President Kennedy. So I'm sure Toby would love him as an expert on this podcast.
Actually, there's some of us that are 100% sure. All right.
Then he ties the Ice Valley woman at the same level in crime as the killing of Kennedy. He says it's the same level of mystery, and he suggests that Bergen is the right place to go to help solve this mystery. And we're like, duh, that's where we know the suitcases are. So then the novelist explains how the luggage could get left at a train station back in the 70s. And then we hear about those suitcases, which were checked in on November 3rd, 6 days before the body was found. Inside, the police found lots of stuff, disguise stuff, wigs, glasses with no correction, lots of different expensive clothes with no labels on anything. That was a very interesting 10 minutes of the podcast that could have been condensed to about 90 seconds. They also found a notebook full of codes and a plastic bag, which led them somewhere. Needless to say, it was important. So, of course, they repeat all of that information from the last 5 minutes several times. They also found a fingerprint which matched the Eastall woman. There are a lot of sound effects and sound design in this section. Okay, then for some reason, they keep talking to this novelist as a source. There's a lot of music. Then they get on a ferry, and there are a lot of ferry sounds. They go to a place called Stavanger, following a clue found in the suitcase. It's a shoe bag. There's a little geography lesson on the boat about the islands and the landscape. Then we meet the shoe shopkeeper, who apparently saw the Eastall woman alive and somehow remembers her and their whole shoe transaction half a century later.
The shoe transaction?
Yes, he has a lot of valuable information. He says she was good looking, she spoke English, but it wasn't English, and she wasn't Norwegian, and she had a bad perfume smell and a lisp, and she had a gap in her two front teeth.
What the Okay.
And that leads us to a name. There's a name, Fenella Lork.
Vanilla?
Fenella Lork.
It's like vanilla ice.
Cue more music.
It sounds like something from Austin Powers.
Tons more music right here.
Falada vagina.
Side note, I learned everyone in Norway wears rubber boots all the time, and so do I. So they are my people, I learned listening to this episode. Okay, trip to the hotel where they know the Eastall woman stayed. More employees who remember a woman they met for a few minutes nearly 50 years ago, which invites the question, why do they all still have the same jobs that they had 15 years ago? They never explain that.
Pays well.
One of them says she was from Belgium. Then there's some speculation about fuel cans. Did the murderer bring them away from the scene? Is that proof of a murder? Also, witnesses are showing the burnt lady photo. They all say it's super gross and scary. Murder cops are involved. There's more sound effects and music. Then some lady says she remembers the Eastall woman's signature almost 50 years later.
They're full of shit.
And then she says apparently she stayed at the Stavanger Hotel for 9 days, which is mysterious, but I'm not sure why. And then the episode ends with a tease for next week. Could there be a second Eastall woman? And then the episode ends with more chorus music and rain.
So you say to somebody...
The answer is no. There's no second Eastall woman. It's also, all these people remember it because it's just like this big mystery. So... like they probably did interact with her, but in the course of all these years, they've probably blown up their interactions with her into something much bigger than it was.
Yeah.
And then you got, like, he doesn't think that Americans know who killed John F. Kennedy.
No, he says no one's 100% sure who killed John F. Kennedy.
Yeah,
No one.
Like 90% of people are 100% sure, I think. And then if he's like, that's the bar that he's holding this unidentified ice woman.
Yep.
As being the same as murdering an American president?
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
I don't know.
Toby, I'm wondering this. They go to some woman and they say, hey, do you remember this woman like from 50 years ago? And she says, oh, yeah. She had a gap in her tooth and she smelled like cheap perfume.
It was a man, yes.
They're just fucking with them, right?
No, apparently.
Of course I remember them.
These people say they remember. I'm just saying. He says that he describes it in detail. I'm just telling you what happened on the podcast. You didn't hear it for yourself. I did.
All right, Toby and Patrick.
I do legitimately think that if some ice woman had come by my office and then disappeared and become a big mystery, I would probably be like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird.
Unfrozen cave woman?
All I have to say is the fact that we're calling her the Ice Woman now. The podcast is called Death in Ice Valley. She's the Eastall woman. She was not made of ice. Woman. She's not like one of those X-Men.
Eastall is Norwegian for ice.
But she wasn't an ice woman, she was just a woman with a gap in her teeth.
But you guys, what did they think of Shay?
We'll get to
did they think Shay was super bossy or no?
We'll get to that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Toby, you're not interested in listening to episode 3.
You know, I don't know. I could do one of these again.
Me giving you or somebody, because I'm not sure I'm down.
Right. We don't necessarily have to do it for all the listeners out there.
Right. Okay. So I will perhaps.
That's my level of interest.
On weeks when I have time, listen to Death in Ice Valley and recap it for you. Okay. Now let's move on. We have a big one of these to talk about. So go ahead, Kevin. Can you read this for me?
True Crime Update.
Huge news today, guys. Huge news.
They found the ice woman?
No. They didn't find the ice woman. There was an arrest in the so-called Golden State Killer case. This, of course, was the rapist and murderer described by Michelle McNamara in her best-selling book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which, of course, was the topic of our very first Patreon Toby's Toby Time Book Club podcast, which we released to all of our listeners for free today. But that's not why this was interesting. It's interesting because this decades-old case may have been solved. Patrick, I know you were following this very closely. What did you think of the news? Did you watch the press conference? What are your thoughts?
Okay, can I tell you my honest first thought was, okay, he's got a name now. Can we never, ever again say Earons?
Yes.
That was my first thought.
Terrible brand.
Horrible. I sort of skipped through the press conference. I watched as much of it as I could. I'm fascinated to learn more. I feel like we haven't been given a ton of information. The thing that I'm really excited to know more about, just like having read Michelle McNamara's book, I'm really curious about like the technical details. Like, did he remember that geo mapping that they did?
Yes.
I want to know like how much of that stuff they got right. So I'm excited about like tomorrow's news when we get more.
That's right. Now, so the suspect is Joseph James D'Angelo. He's 72 years old. Interestingly, he did serve as a local police officer for 3 years during this string of rapes and burglaries. And he was made to leave the police department after he was arrested for shoplifting, refused to have a hearing, just sort of, I guess, gave up. But one of the things that he was caught shoplifting was dog repellent. And we know that in the timeline of the cases, the Golden State Killer killed a dog shortly after this shoplifting arrest. So we do know that the Golden State Killer was concerned about dogs and that this guy who was arrested today also was apparently concerned about dogs. Kevin, what do you think? I know you did some reading on the press conference and so forth. And by the way, full disclosure, I couldn't watch it because I was taping another podcast when it was on, which broke my heart. So I asked you to look into it. What did you learn?
Well, like you said, this is one of those things, and it reminded me of In the Dark season 1, where their thesis statement is there are no such things as cold cases, just failed investigations.
Yeah.
And when it started with the Jacob Wetterling press conference, she described a scene of police officers patting themselves on the back.
Yep.
For we never gave up after 30 years. It's been 30 years of long, hard work, and there was some of that again.
A lot of
today.
that.
Now, I think it would be wrong to say if it were not for Michelle McNamara, there would never be an arrest in this case. I think she definitely can be credited for bringing public attention to this again.
And pressure.
And I think that her investigative work was certainly, it'll bear out that there were some contributions made to it, even if the police don't say they are. But, the police officers were working on this, and, to what extent could be argued.
Real question.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard in a press conference, police or law enforcement of any kind give credit to an investigative reporter or journalist or media person for helping their investigation?
No.
It's not done.
No, it's not done.
It's not done. So even if I think she had...
Because, they do legitimate work, and they're defensive of that, too.
Right.
But also, you have to look at the long game, which talks about prosecution.
Right.
And then, are you suddenly going to are you still going to give the defense something that they can argue, saying, "Oh, you relied on something you got out of a book,
right?
To frame my client."
Or maybe
there's
one
some
of the cops,
too.
But maybe one of the cops she was talking to, with whom she shared information, spread it around the investigative team.
Yeah.
We don't know.
What was the break? Why was the arrest made when it was made? What broke it
DNA.
open?
Oh, well, it really was DNA?
Yeah, it hadn't been tested.
When did they decide to test this particular DNA?
That's not clear yet, I don't think, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard.
Yeah, so Toby, what are your thoughts at this point? And when you heard this case, there had been arrested in this case, what'd you think?
Well, basically what Patrick just asked was what suddenly led to them figuring this guy, and I guess it was DNA. I saw the headline and I read a 1 or 2 paragraph thing right, I guess, when it first broke. So I don't know a ton about what happened, but he wasn't anybody who was touched on in the book, was he?
No, but there was a lot of speculation in the book about whether or not he was a cop. Remember
right.
There was the rapist / killer would tell people to freeze. He had that big flashlight. Right. He was really familiar with the neighborhoods. People said that he moved like a cop. He sort of had understanding of the community like a cop would. Those the 2 big theories were either cop or property developer / pilot. Those were the 2 big theories.
I was going to say, I'm happy to put the pilot theory to bed. That was a little out there for me.
It was, but I liked it. I'm not going to
lie. Owls.
Listen, Toby, I've learned a lot.
I was mostly surprised it wasn't an owl.
You guys, it's an honor just to have the owl conversation with you on this podcast.
I know. I have learned a lot about the doctrine of chances, which was used in the Peterson case and which was used in the case that's currently being covered on Undisclosed. The doctrine of chances being that a legal theory in which, if something weird happened to you once and then something weird happened to you again, the prosecutor going to be what are the chances that this would happen twice?
That you married a psycho.
Exactly. So it's a kind of, and it was used in the Peterson case, and that's going to come out more, I think. But we all know, Toby, that you think that Michael Peterson did it and an owl didn't. We get it, Toby. We get it.
It's not that I think Michael Peterson did it as much as I'm pretty sure that an owl did not.
I got to tell you, I love a conspiracy theory. I was going to keep my mouth shut. I'm the 1% who doesn't, the whole JFK thing. I was wait, why are we all so definitive all of a sudden? I love a good conspiracy theory. I don't think that Queen did it. I think the blowpoke thing was a lot. Yeah, Rebecca, you and I have had endless conversations about this, and I love talking about the owl theory. I don't want to get in the middle of anybody's conversation, but I think the owl theory is a possibility.
I do too. What do you think, Kevin? On the record, once again, owl theory or not?
It's intriguing.
Yes.
I would like to study that a little further.
Once again, it's 3 against 1.
Yeah.
A team owl.
Team owl.
I'm so scared of getting in trouble on this podcast. Can you tell?
Why?
Oh.
I don't know, because I love you guys so much. This is like me sitting in a room having a conversation with Julia Roberts, George Clooney, and I don't know who
Patti
else is famous
LuPone.
and handsome. Yeah, thank you.
Which one am I? Patti LuPone.
You're Patti LuPone.
For sure.
I knew
Oh
it.
my God.
Toby's George Clooney.
That makes you Julia Roberts, Kevin.
Oh, super. What can I say? I'm thrilled.
It's your long doe-like legs.
It must be. It must be. So Golden State Killer, everybody, we're happy. We're happy, of course.
It's still developing.
I feel like it's early days. I just want more information. It's like whenever there's like Trump news, I always like scroll into my podcast to see like the emergency podcasts. I just want more news. I just want to know more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that people who listen to this show, they were tweeting to us today and they were saying like, you have to do something on this. And I'm like, there's not a lot for us to do. Like, we don't really know anything yet. Something might come out tomorrow. I speculate.
Get on a plane.
I just have to say one more time, I listened to the audiobook, and so I had to hear that poor woman say the word earons 8,000 times. I'm just so glad we have a name.
Patrick, that reminds me of something else about this suspect. What? There's another way that they can check whether or not he's the real guy.
What?
Patrick?
It involves a strip search.
Oh, yeah. This poor man. Okay, I strike that. Take that back. He's a horrible person who deserves everything he has coming to him. But this guy, was it just me or did Michelle McNamara have to refer to his small penis 800 times over the course of the writing of the book? It was like, this guy has a very small penis, you guys. Like, as if it weren't obvious.
And now we know.
That's one sketch artist rendering I never saw.
Yeah. No, but it is true. Kevin, I know you didn't read the book, but like many, many, many of this guy's victims, like they would characterize him in different ways physically. Some of them would say he was like puffy, and some of them would say he was lean, and some of them would say he was tall, and some of them would say he was short, some of them would say he was blonde, some of them say he's brunette. Everyone said he had a tiny penis. Every single one.
Oh, gosh.
I also, like, now that we have a face to go with it, I'm, like, playing back some of the other scenes about, like, how he'd get, like, super girly and be like, don't shoot me, officer.
Yes.
Or, like, him on the bike, like, riding away. Like, it's so interesting now that you have a face to put on this guy. All of these, like, it's, you know, when you would see those pictures of the, you know, of the sketches with him with the ski mask on, it's so terrifying. But then now that, like, he's unmasked, he just looks like a stupid, puffy old man with a small peen. You know what I mean? Go rot in jail, jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, that's, I think, all we can say about it at this point.
Really?
Maybe some huge news will break between now and when this podcast drops, and we have to cut this whole section.
It has happened.
He's been exonerated.
It has happened.
It has, in fact, happened. All right. So let's move on. I really want to talk briefly about the first episode of a show we talked about last year. We're going to give our first impressions of the new season of the HBO smash hit Westworld.
I dreamt I was on an ocean. You and the others on the distant shore.
Were you with us?
No.
What's it mean?
Dreams don't mean anything, Dolores. That answer doesn't seem to satisfy you.
Because it's not completely honest.
In 2016, when season 1 finished, we talked about Westworld's themes of free will, the God complex, unreliable timelines, man's inhumanity, and the power of storytelling. And we talked about a lot of robot sex. Last week, the HBO series returned, and we got to see the aftermath of the robot revolution, and that Delos Incorporated has at least 5 more parks for us to explore. All right, so Patrick, you were kind enough to watch the season premiere of season 2 of Westworld for us, but you've never seen the show before. No. So Patrick, with no context, do you have questions for us about what you saw in Westworld or observations that you would like to share?
Well, okay, so I'm not like, I mean, I live in the world, so I've heard people talk about it. I've seen stuff about this on Facebook, but like, I guess my theory, and my husband Steve and I were talking about this, like there's just no way that with all of these gorgeous robots that wouldn't just be a sex park.
Right.
I'm assuming that like that's a sex park. That has to be what that is.
It's actually a rape and pillage park is kind of what it is.
With cowboy hats.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So I also noticed this is a J.J. Abrams thing. Is that right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of Lost imagery for sure. Like,
absolutely.
Definitely, like that whole thing on the beach was very reminiscent of the Lost pilot. And also, there's a thing where they go into this room where I think there's usually like a model of the park or whatever, and there was just a dead bear on top of it, which was very Lost to me.
Yep.
I guess I also have to say Jeffrey Wright, the lead guy, he is like totally a national treasure. He's like a Broadway guy. He was in the original Angels in America and won all the Tonys for it. And the acting is incredible. I think, Rebecca, one of the notes to you was like, I would totally still hit Ed Harris. I don't care if he's Asian. I also wrote that Tandy Newton is like making me question my very, very strongly asserted homosexuality.
Yep.
But it seems fascinating. I mean, it seems like a very interesting idea. It seems very well done. It's like I was super into it. I actually even felt like I could just keep going like without going back.
Well, one of the things, Patrick mentioned Lost, Kevin, and one of the things that's happening is, we know who the characters are. Tandy Newton's robot character has had all these upgrades, so she can just talk like us. Like, she's no longer trapped in the Westworld character that her robot was. She's now like a modern person. But Dolores, even though she's had this evolution around her rebellion, still talks in riddles like one of the enlightened people from the others in Lost. And I find Dolores talking in riddles kind of infuriating. What do you think?
You posed that question as a riddle. I don't know. I mean, Dolores isn't the most interesting character to me. I'm really intrigued by Bernard.
Yep.
Kind of modern day Pinocchio. And you have, the Man in Black. That's really good. He's really good. Dolores isn't my favorite, but she is, the figurehead of the robot revolution.
Yeah. And she also is a super good actress.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, I thought she was so interesting.
Yeah,
I
she's
actually
great.
loved that character.
Yeah, she's great.
It was in that review, Rebecca, by the way, that you introduced the term face acting.
Face acting, yes. Also otherwise known as
acting.
Yeah. Toby, I know you have thoughts, but can we just talk first about the scary-ass white drone robot, Toby?
Which one is that?
The one inside the little pod where the new CEO went, of the chairman of the board, with Bernard when they're down there.
The robot that
below.
just like its white muscles.
Yes, it's just like tendons.
I think I may have given up at that point.
Oh, really? So you're out. You didn't enjoy this?
No.
Okay, why not?
I think it kind of runs into the same problem that Stranger Things did, which is that after the first season where the season is spent like trying to figure out what the deal is, and then it's kind of revealed to you and there's some kind of resolution, that you start up the next season and it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? We've got these characters and we've got this kind of world created, so what's the next thing to happen? I guess I was just watching, I probably watched the first 40 minutes, maybe. To me, and maybe I didn't stick with it long enough or whatever, but it didn't seem like things were moving in like super interesting ways. I mean, part of it is I thought the best part of what I watched was the very opening scene where they're on the beach and like these humans are executing robots like one after another. And the only person who's having any kind of emotional reaction to it is another robot, right? Bernard. Right. So I thought that was like a pretty interesting scene and like kind of was in keeping with some of the themes of season one. But then after that, it sort of became more of like an adventure type thing with like robots being mean to humans and, some humans realizing that suddenly it's like, oh, okay, well, it's not safe here anymore. So anyway, at that point, I got a little, I don't know if discouraged is the right word, but I was like, I don't know if I want to spend the next 20 minutes of my life watching more of this. But maybe I'll be convinced to go back to it.
So it sounds like he's out for now. Kevin, I do have one concern that I wanted to raise with you.
Yeah.
As a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Do you remember in the first movie in the rebooted Star Wars franchise?
You mean in the first prequel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember the backdrop of conflict being about taxes?
Yeah, that was kind of stupid.
It's kind of how I feel about the IP conversation in Westworld. The idea that there's like this corporate IP battle and this like corporate intrigue.
I think that's kind of a MacGuffin. I think it's just an idea. It's something there to add some stakes to why this is important to keep these robots going and keep this park together.
Yeah.
But that's the best you can come up with?
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Well, what else do they have?
You're spending millions of dollars on this?
It's literally the same thing they did in Jurassic Park and all the movies, was that like this is an important and valuable invention that we have to preserve. So even though it kills people, let's like make sure that, you know what I mean? It's the same exact thing.
We want the viewers to value the quote unquote life and quote-unquote soul
Yep.
in the robots.
Yes.
But the value system of the bad guys, i.e. Delos, International, whatever they are, they're not in it for the battle of the soul
Right.
and humanity of the robots. You have to give them something else to motivate them to
Intellectual
understand.
property is the thing.
And what? Yeah, money,
All right.
money, and that's what that is. They're all money bags.
Patrick, I have a question for you. You sent me a note that I want to just follow up on.
Oh, no.
All the wrong people are getting naked. What do you mean by that?
Well, to be completely honest, that guy that gets like full frontal, I was like, he is so cute. And then he started getting undressed and like it just got worse with every article of clothing that came off.
Yeah.
I was like, no. Oh, God, no. Oh, God, no.
But we know he's not the Golden State Killer.
Yeah, that's true. But like, give me some James Marsden. Give me 9,000-year-old Ed Harris.
Yep.
Give me Anthony Hopkins. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, these women are so gorgeous. Everyone on this show is so gorgeous. The other thing too that I took issue with was like the sweeping shots of these men drinking whiskey straight from the bottle.
Yep.
Have you ever seen anybody do that? I don't care how many of your like hot robot friends have been murdered. Nobody does that. There are glasses all over the place. Nobody swigs it from the bottle and doesn't gag. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So, Kevin, question for you.
Yeah.
How do we get Toby back into watching Westworld season 2?
I think we have to add cheap Enya music.
Mm-hmm.
And
Cut rate Enya
cut
music.
rate Enya music. I mean, it would be cut rate like Willie Nelson or
Yeah.
Hank
Dolly Parton.
Hank Williams. Yeah, something country western.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
So you think cut rate Willie Nelson is going to get me back into the
Could
show?
be. Could be.
I don't know.
So where's this
I would
shot,
love to
guess?
know what cut rate Willie Nelson sounds like.
The right people getting naked.
Yeah.
It ain't going to be good.
I think you need robot basketball players.
Robot basketball.
There.
Yeah.
That might be a good start.
Yes.
He'll do that. It's an interesting world. It's I'm still fascinated by it. And the thing that really is interesting is like how they work out like the logistics in the story
Yeah.
about how they get robots back and forth.
Yep.
And, those robots take a lot of abuse and they have to repair them.
Yes.
And it's such a pain to get those guys out there to repair the robots.
Yes.
Because
Yes. Where's this going?
it's
Yes.
I feel like I'm about to hear an ad transition. I'm so excited.
Yes. Are we?
it's too bad they couldn't just call it yourmechanic.com.
Oh my God, this is so exciting.
And Patrick, I don't know why you're so excited. I know you don't have a car.
Yes.
But if you did, can you imagine what a pain it would be to have to sit around the garage, take time off from work just to get your oil changed or your tires rotated?
Dude, you don't need a car to need a mechanic.
Truer words were never spoken.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's talk about this service called yourmechanic.com.
Yes,
They send the mechanic right to your home or your office, and they'll take care of whatever needs you have. You need an oil change, you want new wiper blades, do you have you need brakes repaired?
Yep.
They will do that. Your mechanic will give you a quote right up front.
Yes.
And that is the actual price
Excellent.
you pay. And they'll even show you what it could cost you if you went repair someplace else. So you have some comparison, and they'll back up their service with a 12,000-mile, 12-month warranty. Plus, if you want, they'll give you full background checks on their mechanics, so you can see their
that's good.
professional references.
Yep.
So, folks, if your car won't start, you got the check engine light on, maybe you need a brake job, what you do is call today to schedule your appointment at yourmechanic.com/crime.
Crime.
And a mechanic will come to your home or office, and for a limited time, you can get $20 off your first service. So that's yourmechanic.com/crime.
Crime.
Or you can call 1-800-701-6230 for $20 off your first service. Yourmechanic.com/crime.
Crime. What else you got, Kevin?
Well, when it comes to buying wine, most of our choices are just made out of habit, right? You get that label again and that kind of one, and I liked a Merlot, so I'm going to get a Merlot again, and it's kind of hard to mix it up. So why go sideways when you can go with First Leaf?
Ooh.
First Leaf is the new online wine club that's putting a stop to boring wine buying, and it
Nice.
uses your own reviews to make personalized wine selections to match your tastes. Now, Laura Bricker is very upset that she can't be here to talk about First Leaf.
I bet.
But we've done this. You could basically start by going online and you answer 3 quick questions about your wine drinking preferences. And then they're going to start you off with an introductory 3-wine pack. And those bottles usually go for $20 a piece. It's just $5 each. Very fine wine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you review those bottles of wine, and it figures out, okay, you like something that has,
it's like an algorithm, like a smart algorithm.
It is. It's like the same thing that gets Pandora that lets you know that you like the Beatles, but not
or like
the Rolling
your
Stones.
audiobook service.
Exactly.
They know what you're going to like based on what you like.
Exactly. And they're refining this. You're always getting the wine that you like. And you never have to worry about spending money on a bad bottle of wine because they guarantee you'll love the wine that you buy, or they will give you your money back. The more wine you taste and rate, the better they customize your box. So try First Leaf Club, where buying great wine is simple. To get your 3-pack of introductory wine for only $15, go to tryfirstleaf.com/crime. That's
crime.
3 wines for only $15 on your first order at tryfirstleaf.com/crime. Experience First Leaf today at tryfirstleaf.com/crime.
Crime. Patrick, was that fun for you to be here for an ad break?
I can't even tell you. I feel like I'm an extra on a TV show that I've loved for years.
Really?
And I'm suddenly in the world. The Kevin commercial transition. Are you kidding me? This is all of this is amazing.
It's very exciting for you, huh?
I will say the other thing that's a little hard to get used to is hearing this the sound effects. So when he says things like true crime update and there's no echo, I have to just do it with my own ears.
Yes.
But I'm making it happen. This is all incredible.
That's okay.
It's a peek behind the curtain.
And now you know how much sophisticated post-production goes into this podcast.
Right.
Meanwhile, I can't figure out how to turn down my gain. I don't even know how many knobs my microphone has.
Oh, God. Get a hold of
It's
your
going
knobs.
great, guys.
Here we go. Moving on, Gimlet's new hit podcast, The Habitat. This series follows 6 volunteers simulating a Mars mission by being cooped up together in one small dome-shaped shelter for a year.
This is absolutely the weirdest landscape I've ever seen.
This is one of the few places on Earth that you can get pretty close to actually physically being on Mars without being on Mars.
We're so damn close to that dream now, we can almost taste it. Soon, maybe very soon, we could be sending the first humans to Mars. But before we take some people and send them hurtling through space to a desolate planet where they'll have only each other for company, we need to know, will they survive the trip? And will they survive each other?
The would-be astronauts are not conducting scientific studies. They are the test subjects in seeing, quite frankly, whether they would get on each other's nerves if sent to a new planet. We will be talking about major plot points in The Habitat, so if you don't want it spoiled for you, jump ahead to our reviews. The time code for those is listed in the show notes. I want to talk about some production stuff first before we get into bigger ideas that I know we feel differently about.
Okay.
Can we agree?
Sure.
The choice to drop all 7 episodes of The Habitat as a binge. It's happening more and more with podcasts, especially these premiere podcasts. I think it's probably driven by business stuff, but I'm not sure. I'd like to know what you guys think of this trend. Patrick, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, I literally think they did this because it's complete garbage and they knew that nobody would come back for the week 2. It's the worst podcast ever made. And I think that if they didn't drop all 7 episodes at once, nobody would. I really, really believe that that's why they did it.
I actually don't think that's why they did it. I think they thought this was great and that it was bingeable. And I think they made the business choice. I believe that ads are digitally inserted in this show. I believe they have a first run flight of ad sales that they can sell all of them at very, very, very top dollar. And then I bet if you listen to this podcast in 2 months, all the ads will be different. It'll be the second flight of
There won't be any Quip toothbrushes?
There might be, but they might be differently placed. It'll sort of be like the first flight, second flight, third flight. And I think when you have all 7 at once, you can sell it as a package. That's my guess.
Can I say just one more thing?
Yeah.
If people are still talking about this garbage podcast in 2 months, I will be literally shocked.
Man, you're coming in strong.
He's coming in hot.
Yeah.
Toby, what do you think of this? Like all 7 episodes available at one time. It's a different kind of experience than what we're used to, these sort of episodic, week-to-week listening experiences.
For this garbage podcast, it's just because they know that people aren't. I don't know. I mean, I sort of felt, I think more like Patrick in that I was like, fuck, I got to listen to 4 more of these things. I don't know what to say. I'm like surprised that at the end, like this was their finished product. And I'm even more surprised that it's number 1 on the podcast charts. Mm-hmm. What this really may be is like one of those experiments where they say it's about one thing, but it's actually about another. And this is maybe just about the power of marketing and podcasts. Mm-hmm. Is that you can like put out something that's just sort of like,
yeah.
And if you market it enough, it'll be number one.
Well, Kevin, can I talk about something positive with you for a second?
Yeah,
Can
sure.
we just pivot to you? Because I know that you really like this podcast. Show your hand now.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, you show your hand now because then they'll know that not everybody feels the way they do.
Okay.
The sound design in the show, perfect.
Yeah, I think it was great. I love the music design.
Music design, perfect.
I mean, the Morgan Freeman thing was kind of
terrible.
But the doo-wop song was fabulous. I laughed out loud.
But also
I
just
enjoyed that.
The quality of the production.
Oh, yeah.
Gimlet does it better than anybody else.
Considering they just handed these, I'm going to call them astronauts, these fake astronauts a tape recorder and said, okay, have at it, and they didn't mess that up.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good.
So let's move on because the thing that I think is the thing here that we are disagreeing about as a group.
We all listened to the wrong podcast?
No, is that after a pretty in-depth episode 1 that featured the person running the experiment, that talked about some of the underlying principles of the experiment, and that talked about why Lynn got into telling this story and sort of what the process was. After that episode, this podcast basically turns into Real World or Big Brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. Like, I'm a huge Survivor fan, but I love Survivor because I love the drama. My husband made this great point that I thought was really accurate, which was they had a choice. They could have made a really interesting science podcast, or they could have gone for a podcast that was about human drama. And and I'm sorry not to steal Kevin's line that I love the most more than anything in the world, but like there was just no there on that front.
Right.
Like, remember at the end of the podcast when we go back to the scientist and she's telling us about all like the saliva samples and all of the urine samples and all of the hair samples. I would have loved if she had been in every single episode. Like, there's a really interesting science podcast here, but they totally didn't go for that. They went for something dramatic that they just didn't get.
I am 100% with you. To me, I don't understand that choice. This was a science experiment. And there was one science moment, like in episode 2, when she has the adorable French guy giving the tour of the dome, which is super great. And then she has him get in the shower and she's like, let me tell you about the science for as long as it takes while he's in the shower.
Yes.
And then she's about to tell us this fact about what they do with recycled mice pee on the International Space Station. And then in the middle of that sentence, the shower cuts off. And just to be cute, they don't tell us. And I'm like, that's why I'm here. I want to know about the recycled mouse pee on the International Space Station.
Do you?
I want to know
Totally.
about why this experiment exists and what the factors are. And I want to know the reasons for those factors. I feel like you could have the human drama. Why can't you also have the science?
Well, I think you actually can't have the human drama because what you did was get 6 really responsible people who were really committed to the mission sign up to do this thing they knew was going to be like all of those elements of it were going to be awful, and they just decided not to care about that. So like, you can't actually have the drama because these people were intentionally not creating drama. Like, this wasn't a prize for $1 million. This was a science experiment,
Right.
And it felt almost condescending that we were being like, when she was trying to needle them about their relationships and who's sleeping with who and who's dating who, and they didn't want to talk about it because they were responsible grown-ups who had signed up to do a thing that they were there to do.
Well, let's talk about the characters then, because this is another issue. We get hints of who these 6 people are, Toby, but the show focuses on them being like this thesis statement we get at the beginning is that these are all strong, successful athletes. And we're going to put them in a thing together. And, that's going to be difficult for these like strong, successful athletes. But then throughout the show, we get glimpses that there's more depth there. They're scientists, they're doctors. They've been on these missions before. They have reasons. Some of them want to be astronauts. They're aspiring astronauts. So there's depth and talent there. There's only 6 of them. You've written novels. That's not a ton of characters to like build enough where you could just say them by name and who they are. And like, there's a lot there. Do you feel like there was a superficial treatment of these people as they were shown before the experiment and then throughout the series?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing was hard because nobody really wanted to talk too bluntly about anybody else. There's that one weird part where they're all like sort of there's somebody they all hate and nobody really wants to go into it too much, but it's Shay. And then they talk about it a little bit, and people don't want to talk about whether they hooked up or like you kind of get a sense from them talking. But to be honest, like the thing that really stuck out was like, okay, the people with the funny accents, I can kind of keep track of who's who.
Cyprian and Christiana.
Yeah, but again, maybe I wasn't like as focused as I should have been. Like I wasn't like sitting in a sensory deprivation tank with headphones on. But when I was done listening to it, I was thinking, what just happened? Which leads to the question is like, what would be like if I was like, all right, they're going to do this like biodome project and I'm going to make a podcast about it. What is going to be interesting about this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I want to focus? And you guys are kind of getting to the same thing. And like who hooks up with whom is not that high on my list of what's interesting. The fact that people get on each other's nerves, it's like, yeah, of course they do. You know, I mean, that's inevitable. I guess there was nothing in the podcast that I was like, that's weird. You know, everything was like, oh yeah, of course it would be like that. Of course it would be like that. You know, of course people are going to hook up. Of course people are going to piss each other off. You know, of course you're going to go through some hardships like taking, 90-second showers or whatever. Like all that stuff, none of it seemed like very revelatory. So I think, again, like you guys were saying, like if you look at it, you're like, well, actually the science of it might be interesting. And I don't know if you can get closer to what it'd be like to be on a thing like this in Mars. But the reality is, if they want to, they can walk outside and take off their suits and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
They're not actually, the sense of like complete claustrophobia is not there. Like you'd be like if you're on Mars and like you literally cannot walk away from this. And that to me seems like that's adding like exponential stress onto these relationships.
I think the closest they got to being more than that and talking about, because the experiment really, she does lay it out. There is data, they're collecting samples, they're doing all this stuff with the people, but there is also the psychological experiment. I think that the one that the show chose to focus on, the getting along, the potential romances, I don't think that was the right choice. I think it got the closest to being the right choice when they did the episode about Cyprian finding out about the news from Paris. Kevin, what did you think about that episode, and what do you think about this choice to focus on this part of the human experiment rather than the other parts of the human experiment?
Well, I actually think that part of the human experiment is the only one that's sort of interesting, and I think it's the one that we would listen to. I mean, I don't know if this were a podcast about what happens to their urine after 12 months, whether that's something that would really be the thing we'd want to binge.
There was a whole lot of scatological stuff in
well,
this.
there was
way too much.
Well, look,
farting, pooping.
Oh, the farting! I can't, you guys.
All right, I'm going to start with something, and I'm going somewhere with this. Okay, so you talk about the the toilet that overflows,
yes.
right? And that leads into a discussion about, well, here's Apollo 10. And there's a turd floating through the air. Right?
That was
and
interesting.
Right, that was right. So for every time where they, and this isn't a perfect podcast, so I can give some criticisms. For every time when there's some anecdote in an episode, and it's the communications breakdown, or it's about they end up like either tying it to a story, like the France attacks tied to the the guy in the space station during 9/11, right? They find some other tie to kind of like what's going on, and then on occasion they talk to people from the lab or whatever that you would call the ground control, one of the psychologists or whatever, and have them comment on that. Now, I think that if they had done more of that and made those people more of the discussion to give the play-by-play about what do you think is happening with this, you might feel a little bit more like the drama or lack of drama is more interesting to you than just sort of being an audio diary of my year in a tiny house.
Right. That's what it is. It's my year in a tiny house. In a stupid tiny house.
I mean, it seems like they could have woven in like at least some thoughts about how people in those situations, like the way their behaviors change, or like predictions that were made, or some kind of theory, so that you're like, you have some kind of be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, or oh, that doesn't make sense, or that was borne out, or this wasn't borne out. Instead, it's just not that interesting stuff happening. And part of it may be, I mean, they invested a year and probably quite a bit of money in having this thing that seemed like it would be super interesting. And then at the end, it's like, well, the thing in Paris happened and we had a French guy in there. And then somebody got stuck in lava, and then they didn't want to go outside anymore. So they wouldn't let anybody else go outside. Like, those are the two things.
Well, but here's the thing that was disappointing about the Paris episode to me. So they make that comparison between Cyprian in the dome and then that guy who was in the International Space Station when 9/11 happened. They don't talk to that guy. They just tell us about that guy. You know, I immediately jumped to Mark Kelly, the astronaut who was in Houston when his wife, Gabby Giffords, was shot in Arizona. And I remember that story about him he was like on a training thing in Houston and him thinking she was dead and feeling like, and I've heard him talk about it, like he was helpless, like he was like there and he couldn't do anything. And he's a real life astronaut who they probably could have interviewed about that mindset.
Yeah, you know, it ends up being a lot about it ends up being a lot about, well, what does Lisa and the producers think might happen? And there are all these NASA experts who are there who actually have legitimate theories.
Yeah, and they're interesting.
They're trying to replicate experiments.
Yes.
The only time we heard anything like that is to say, oh, you know, around 6 months something happens.
That was so interesting.
They must have a lot of sort of data. Or
why didn't they tell us that at the point in the podcast when it was the 6 months?
Is it important that you had 3 men and 3 women?
Yes.
As opposed to 4 men and 2 women?
Right.
Or like, why are you coming up with these different things?
Right.
And like, tell us about that.
Right.
I think that as a podcast producer, if I were making this podcast and it was completely unknown, I would be making 3 podcasts. So I'd be making the science podcast, I'd be making the Survivor podcast, and I'd be making the whatever podcast. And then when it was over, I would decide what podcast this was. And it seems like they decided from the very beginning that they were making a Survivor podcast. And so, yes, that's what I think. I think that all of that is missing. There was nothing there with the interpersonal stuff. But they then hadn't done any of those interviews along the way with the scientists, with the NASA, with the actual people that could tell us, like, what are you learning from this? I think one of my favorite parts of this podcast was at the end we learned that they're just starting this all over again.
Yeah.
Where there's the guy who's talking about how he's expecting to make 5 new best friends. And it's like, oh, we just happened to record this one, but they're doing this over and over and over again. And so I think that, like, you know, they should have gone into this not knowing what this podcast was going to be. And it seems like they decided what this podcast was going to be before they started making it.
I actually disagree with you. Lynn Levy was a reporter on Radiolab. And she has like real chops in digging deep into science stories in particular. She was a science reporter. I think this was decided, these decisions were made to make it fluffier, to make it more bingeable, to make it sexier. I believe that she gathered all this tape herself. She was the one sending them questions, getting things back. I think she largely worked on this project independently, maybe when she was doing other stuff, and then she had all this tape. This was 2016 that she got this tape. This was not last year. This was 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think that she had this great idea. She got the tape. Maybe or not, Gimlet was attached to it at that point. Who knows? Who cares? I think they shaped it into this. They thought this was the most interesting angle, the best angle. I think it was for a demographic. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, the episodes are all almost exactly the same length. They're about a half an hour. Mm-hmm. They're like sitcom length. It's sort of like that format of podcast. Like it's not super thoughtful. It has a super thoughtful premise, but it's not super thoughtful. It's very bingeable. For all the things I'm saying that I don't like about it, like I did listen to the whole thing in one day. I found it very listenable and like light and fluffy and bingeable. I think the choice was to make it less science, more light. And I feel like I hear it because I do feel like there are breadcrumbs of the deep stuff in there, and other stories Lynn Levy has done, I've heard those things fleshed out, and they weren't fleshed out here. And I feel like what we were left with was the decisions that were made by whoever was overseeing it.
One of the things I love about Gimlet is that they take chances and they fail. You know, I think that like there's so many, I don't always agree with the shows that they cancel. I love that they make, you know, there are shows that Gimlet has canceled for whatever reason that I thought were amazing that I wish were still on the air. I am so curious to know when Alex Bloomberg sat down and listened to this podcast made him say like, yes, this is the thing we're going to put all of our Gimlet weight and money behind because this is our brand, this is who we are, and these are the kinds of stories we want to tell. I would love to ask him that question.
Yeah.
This is going to sound flip, but I don't actually mean it that way. But it would have been helpful, I think, if they'd watched the movie Biodome with Pauly Shore.
Instead of Space Camp?
Oh, Patrick loves Space Camp. Don't go there.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
But I mean, the whole funny thing, I mean, I don't even know if the movie's funny, but the whole setup is that two wacky guys go into like this exact same situation. The reason why that's a funny setup is because the people who are going to be there are like these kind of intense, serious, people who are part of an experiment, and they need like wacky guys to come and like loosen them up. And I think that's kind of what ended up, happening, is that you've got these very purposeful people, and you're not going to have, it's not, Real Housewives of LA or whatever. It's serious professional people put in a very constrained situation, and yeah, they get on each other's nerves, but does that really carry a podcast?
I got to tell you, it wouldn't take me 6 months to hate the person who brought a didgeridoo.
That was my question. Pop quiz.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The didgeridoo.
Who is the most annoying person to be in a dome with? Is it the dad joke guy, the ukulele guy, or the didgeridoo lady?
It's dad joke, fart in the spacesuit, sit on you and fart on you, make the fart armpit thing contest.
You hate that guy.
I kept saying, can we please open that death door and let him die first?
So I would first say that if you're ever doing something like this, like one of the rules has to be no freaking musical instruments.
Okay.
Because
right, of course.
Because if that's going to be one of the things you bring, it's because you want to play it all the time, and you're just going to drive people crazy.
Yeah.
So that being said, and no instruments would come into my biodome. The dad joke guy has to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I agree with dad joke guy. Okay, now the second pop question.
I'll bring bongos and a tambourine.
Yeah, exactly. A kazoo.
Second pop quiz question for you guys.
Yeah.
Team Shay, team no Shay. Kevin, go.
Team no Shay.
Why is that?
Well, she seemed really kind of annoying. Although I don't know if I'd like Christiana. She seemed to be kind of emo.
She likes sleeping in the finished winter.
She likes Super Cool Rocks. Super Cool Rocks.
What do you think, Patrick? Team Shay? No Team Shay.
I mean, I married Shay, so totally Team Shay. She's there for the rules and to make everybody do their job and to like take it seriously and to get shit done. So 100% hashtag Team Shay.
What do you think about her dietary judginess?
I'm 100% with her. Listen, if you stop eating the Oreos and start eating the banana smoothies, you won't have to fart in your spacesuit and I won't have to hear about it.
Wait, they have to recycle their piss, but somebody can just drop them off some Cheetos? I don't get that. What are the rules of this game?
I know.
I'm listen, I want Shay to be my friend in real life. I want to find her on Facebook.
Toby, what do you think? Team Shay or team no Shay?
It's a tough one. I wish I knew what the alternative was. Yeah, I don't like being food shamed.
Yeah.
That's kind of a downer.
Yeah.
In a biodome.
But in fairness to Shay, did she say that to them or did she just say that to Lynn?
Oh, no, I think she said it to them.
She said it to everybody.
Yeah, she probably did. She's just sick of their farts. I can't believe how much we talk about farts in this podcast.
Yeah, so much scatological stuff. I think my feelings about Shay is she's the person at work who's just really, really... she says it. Like, I take it seriously. It's my job. I'm not friends with people that I work with, right? Like, that's her thing. I don't necessarily think that's who you would send to live on Mars with people for a year. Like, everybody has to be the personality type that's more flexible. That's more like, yeah, I could be friends with people that I work with. I actually think that's a trait you look for.
I bought her whole thing at the end. Like when Lynn says to her at the exit interview in the end, like, everybody hated you. And she was like, yeah, that wasn't necessarily my objective, but like people survive these missions because they have a common enemy. And if I had to be that common enemy, like I'm not saying that was my goal, but if that's what I was and they were all able to like rally against me, I mean, I think that there is value there.
All right. Well, I don't think there's going to be much surprise here in our reviews about this podcast, The Habitat, but I think it is time to do that. I mean, there was more about the story. Frankly, I have like 20 more questions about the storytelling style, the story,
I like that.
The characters. I couldn't get to any of them. I think they were all bogarted by
farts,
yeah, Cheetos, didgeridoos. And by the way, the worst thing about Shay is her insistence on calling her didgeridoo her digi. I found that super annoying.
I'm with you 1,000,000%.
It's like those people who call their ukulele the uke. I'm sorry.
Uke.
Just
I can't.
say what it is. Say what it is.
Yeah.
The cello player does not say my chell. The guitar player does not say my git. Like, nobody does that.
They do say my axe.
Do they? I don't. Do they?
Yeah.
Do the regular
also,
ones
there's
do that?
no chance in the world that if you play the didgeridoo, you don't know that it's annoying. Like, you for sure know that. Everyone you've ever met has told you.
If I brought my clarinet,
you wouldn't call it
my
your
penny
Claire.
whistle.
Your penny whistle. You mean your pen?
Okay.
I did picture that scene in Animal House where John Belushi grabs that guy's guitar and just smashes it against the wall.
Yes.
Like, I just was waiting for that to happen.
Yes, there is a reason why in Cards Against Humanity there's a card that says, that douche with an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so let's do that thing that we do. Let's go around the horn and just give our thumbs up, thumbs down review to The Habitat from Gimlet. Patrick Hines, I'm going to start with you.
Huge thumbs down. I am so honored to get to offer a thumb up or down on this, and it's a huge thumb down. You guys, we didn't get to talk about Space Camp. It's the most amazing movie ever. I saw it like 100 times when I was a kid, and go watch it. They mentioned it in this podcast.
Toby Ball, how about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down on The Habitat?
I give it a thumbs down. I think I've explained myself pretty clearly.
All right, well, I'm going to break format. Sorry, Patrick Hines. I'm giving The Habitat a big old fat thumb sideways.
Me on the podcast? Oh my God! I can't. Are you? Listen, it's fine for you to do it, but now Brooke is going to do it every week.
One night only. One night only. Bringing it back.
I hope Lara doesn't listen to this.
Here's why I'm giving it a thumb sideways. Are you ready for my argument?
Yeah.
I enjoyed listening to these podcasts. I enjoyed the experience of listening to it. I binged it all in one day, and I was able to listen to it, and I wanted to hear the next episode, and I listened to the next episode. When it was all said and done, that is when my hate for it set in, my dissatisfaction, my upset with the product and the process and whatever it was that went into it. But I can't, in good conscience, give a podcast I enjoyed listening to episode by episode a straight up thumbs down. I can't. I think about it like a TV show that has lost its luster, but yet I still keep watching. And I'm going to make a comparison here. Kevin and I watched the show Unreal on Lifetime. Season 1 of Unreal was a perfect TV show. It was brilliant. It was funny. It was smart. It was dark. It was beautifully acted, beautifully produced. Season 2 was a train wreck. Season 3 continues to be a train wreck. We are still watching that damn show because it's fun to watch. And this podcast is like that for me. It's like Modern Family. It's still in our DVR after 74 years. It's not even good, yet we still watch it. That's how I feel about The Habitat. It is a big old fat thumb sideways. How about you, Kevin?
I'm a thumbs up. I agree with you. This is like the dehydrated peaches that they've been eating. It's got some flavor. It's got nutrition. Maybe not a lot of substance.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked the storytelling very much. It's questionable whether or not in the end we learned what the moral of the story was.
Or learned anything.
What
happens to the mouse pea on the International Space Station?
It's probably best that we don't know. But in the end, I kind of thought this was it was a good binge. Hey, you got 6 people crammed into a small space, and at the end, all these people come out of this little small space, and that reminds me, it's almost Mother's Day. And this Mother's Day, show her how much you appreciate every job she does with this special limited time offer from 1-800-Flowers.com. So look at
that was the best one ever, Kevin. That was so good.
So right now, ahead of the Mother's Day rush, this is what 1-800-Flowers is going to do for our listeners. You can get 24 multicolored roses for $24. That's just $1 per rose. And they've got great roses that come in a variety, a rainbow of colors, all guaranteed to show up fresh. They're picked from premier farms and shipped overnight to ensure freshness. It's a really an amazing offer. But you have to hurry up because it expires soon. You just pick your delivery date, and 1-800-Flowers will handle the rest. So to order 24 stunning multicolored roses for only $29, go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click the radio icon, and enter code CRIME. That's 1-800-Flowers.com, code CRIME.
Crime. What else you got, Kevin?
Well, can you imagine what the laundry must have been like when they left that habitat?
Full of farts?
Full of farts, yeah. No. One of the first things that you'd want to do, I think, is to get some clean socks.
Yes.
And that's why you would hurry up and order socks from Bombas.
Good idea. They should do that.
Yes.
Bombas are the most comfortable socks in the history of feet. I mean, how often do you think about your socks?
All the time. Look what I'm wearing
Bombas socks! Look at that! Oh, those are great.
I'm a fan of this product.
Put your foot up here. Put it so I can see. Okay. See this right here?
Yes.
This is the built-in blister tab.
Love that. It's my favorite feature besides the arch support.
Yeah, here it is. It's squishy right here. It has
Yep.
the stay-up technology. And look at this. You notice this? There's no toe.
No toe seam.
It's seamless.
Yep.
They've got so many colors and patterns and styles. Bombas looks great at the gym or the office, the habitat.
The closet.
The closet. Any place that you want to go. Bombas are what your feet daydream about. I didn't know if he could daydream, but they do. Remember, for every
Dolores.
Well, for every Bombas purchase that you make, Bombas donates a pair to somebody in need, and they've donated over 7 million pairs of socks. So
That's
keep
great.
cool, keep comfortable, keep contributing with the best socks in the history of feet. Bombas. Buy your new socks at bombas.com/crime and get 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/crime for 20% off. Bombas.com/crime.
Now it's time for my favorite part of this podcast, a little something I like to call, Patrick, want to say it with me? The crime of the week.
Chunk, chunk.
I feel like we're doing like a Make-A-Wish for like some kid.
I'm for sure gonna die tonight. That's absolutely gonna happen. So this is the best thing ever.
Do you feel altruistic?
Yeah, it's like we send Patrick a T-shirt and say, "Hey, little buddy."
You spend 1 minute editing it. You just email the sound file to me. Nobody else ever hears it.
You're like the Brady's buddies.
Totally.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm just going to say, we used to do that when I was on TV. We would do the thing we call the magic microphone. Like when somebody's like really bugging you to like get on camera, and the camera guy would just turn, we'd hold the microphone and we would be recording it, and they would just, oh, it's so great. They walk away.
Yes.
A magic microphone.
That would totally work for me, by the way.
Yeah.
There is a serious crime wave in New Zealand, and it's been caused by a shortage of avocados. The shortage has created a black market for the savory green fruit. Avocados have been poached from the tree and are being sold to takers on Facebook. It's hard to be the owner of an avocado tree in New Zealand because you're constantly fighting off thieves. An Auckland couple had 200 avocados stolen in November and then spotted more suspicious activity last week.
How do they know they took 200? Did they count them before and then count them after?
Avocado inventory.
Yeah.
They say two older men were striking the branches of their avocado trees with a long pole. The owner confronted the pair, took the 12-foot pole, and called the police.
Now we know that's not the Golden State Killer.
That's when the two men escaped, riding off on a mobility scooter.
A mobility scooter.
Police are trying to identify the men in their 60s using surveillance video and fingerprints from the pole. So here's my question for you, panel. These avocado thieves are obviously some bad hombres. What is next on their mobility scooter crime spree? Patrick Hines, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I first just want to say that this is one of those things where it's an international couple, so they're referred to as partners. I was like, yes, gays. God, the next thing, I don't know. I just have this like image in my head of this caper of like one man, like the two guys on the scooter, and they're running away, and one falls off and he's running trying to catch up and get onto the scooter. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of experience with mobility scooters, except for that my 4-year-old loves them when she sees them in grocery stores.
All right. Well, Toby Ball, what do you think is going to be next on these two men's mobility scooter crime spree?
I would guess somebody's Didge.
Kevin, what about you? What's next for these two older gentlemen on their mobility scooter crime spree?
I think they're going to do some Tokyo Drift style racing.
I think they're going to be poaching some cilantro and some garlic and some tomatoes, perhaps to make some mobility scooter guacamole. Perfect. I don't know, guys. That was some low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, like those avocados.
See what I did there?
I'm traumatized by like the amount of avocado we've had to deal with this season on Queer Eye. It's just been a lot.
And hot dogs, randomly. Yeah. Hot dogs?
That tracks.
There's a Queer Eye hot dog joke in there somewhere. I can't find it right now.
I don't think that old school Queer Eye would have ever showcased hot dogs. I'm just going to say that. Now, Patrick Hines, this is when Lara Bricker usually gives us her cat of the week. Is there anything else that you would like to pimp instead of a cat? You can plug away, Patrick. Just go ahead and do it.
You guys, I make 800 podcasts. So I have a new podcast called My So-Called Podcast, which is all about my so-called life. I make a true crime comedy podcast called True Crime Obsessed.
We know.
That's really fun and funny. Yeah, and I make a documentary-style Broadway podcast called Broadway Backstory that just lost a Webby Award. So you can, check them all out.
Well, Patrick Hines, people want to find you online, maybe reach out to you and find out how they can listen to your many podcasts. Or learn more, as I would recommend they do, about your amazing husband, Steve. How can they find you?
Handsome. You can find me on Twitter at Patrick Hines. It's HIND for David, S for Sam. You can find me on Instagram at Patrick Hines _, or you can check out truecrimeobsessed.com for my other true crime podcast.
And Toby Ball, if people want to reach out to you and maybe berate you for not coming in as strong as Patrick Hines did on your hatred of the habitat, how can they find you on Twitter?
Well, first, I do want to make a plug for Patrick's Broadway backstory 2-part series on Hamilton, which
thank you.
Is one of my favorite pieces of podcast work. It's super interesting. The theater is not like in my wheelhouse,
really,
but we listened to it going down to New York City when Patrick got my wife tickets to go and see Hamilton.
Don't tell people Patrick and get tickets to see Hamilton, Toby.
It's like finding out you have avocados in New Zealand.
It's a fascinating story, and it's really well put together.
That's great. When is that going to come out?
That was, and then so if you want to check out, I actually posted a photo of my 1-800-Flowers rose arrangement, and you can catch that on @TobyBallNH.
Is 1-800-Flowers like giving us extra money this week or something?
These fucking flowers just show up.
They're nice flowers.
And Kevin Flynn, how can people reach you online?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Reb Lavoie. You can tweet to our show at Crime Writers On and join the fine folks on the official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group, which I recommend. We have started a new thing where before every podcast, we are doing a little Facebook Live. It's really fun.
You can see the flowers.
You can support us at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media to hear Toby's exclusive, not this week, but usually exclusive book club podcast. And also some more extra content. And for other exclusive ad-free content, including ad-free versions of These Are Their Stories, the Law & Order podcast that drop a week early.
And Married with Podcast.
Our spin-off show, Married with Podcast. Go to StitcherPremium.com/crime. Kevin, can you just for a second say this week's episode of These Are Their Stories, the Law & Order podcast, it's worth a listen for fans of this podcast. Would you not say that it is?
I would say that the voice of the guest might sound recognizable.
I would say that our listeners won't
be disappointed.
Exactly. All right. Go to our website to sign up for our newsletter. Our theme song was performed by Rocksteady Freddy and the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble. And this show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, formerly known as Studio C, the closet in our basement where no one better fucking try to play a ukulele, harmonica, or didgeridoo.
But they can fart.
But on behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Cue the music.
You turn him up just a little bit.
Toby? Who?
It's just Toby. Just Toby. Yeah. Toby's low.
You got to stop. Your pronouns are killing me.
So,
There's
him.
2 hims.
I know, it's usually a him and a her.
Right.
Okay.
We're still a him and a her.
Are you ready, Toby?
Partners in Crime Media.
Meet Namely, the all-in-one HR, payroll, and benefits software employees love to use. Clock in, schedule vacation, and more from your desk or on the go. Plus, use the social feed to share company news and give shout-outs for a job well done. Over 1,000 companies use Namely every day. Get a free demo by visiting namely.com/crime. That's namely.com/crime. Build a better workplace with Namely.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.